The spirit of dialogue is really to try and figure out how in each one of our industries, companies, and particular spheres of influence, we can start making a real sustainable impact on this issue of packaging and plastics and ensuring that there's a sustainable long-term solution to all of this. You're all in a very good mood, so I take it you haven't had a look at the markets and the rand today. Don't. I probably know just about as much as you do as to whether or not this is the big one or we're going to see a V-shaped recovery. Who knows? All I know is that Sasol is probably now $3.50 away from a rights issue, which definitely impacts all of us and our pension funds. So, with that sobering reality, it's now time to get a bit of a global view on this whole issue. And there's an old English saying that where there's muck, there's brass. And there really is a big opportunity here, and I'd like us to focus on the opportunity. I'd like to invite Adwoa Coleman, DOW Packaging and Specialty Plastics, to come and present for us on the DOW perspective. And just, Adwoa, while you're coming up here, I was going to suggest, following on from the waste picker, that we develop an app for waste pickers in this country, maybe one that sits on a feature phone and a smartphone, so USSD, but wouldn't that be a great way of trying to bring the informal into the formal economy? So think about that if you know any coders or anyone in your sphere of influence as a way to help give back. Adwoa, over to you.
Thank you very much. Are you able to hear me? Perfect. Okay, so I wanted to start off, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Adwoa Coleman, and I'm DOW's Sustainability and Advocacy Manager for our plastics business in Africa. So I wanted to start off my presentation with a little video. Hopefully we can get it to work.
Plastics have revolutionized the lives of people everywhere. By making goods more affordable, improving hygiene, extending the freshness of food, and dramatically reducing food waste. However, insufficient global waste management and recycling infrastructure and low recycling rates have resulted in too much plastic being lost to waste and entering our natural environment. This is unacceptable. DOW knows that plastic is too valuable to be lost as waste. So, DOW is taking action to shift toward a circular world for plastic, whereby from design to disposal, the value of plastic is retained, while the burdens placed on the environment are eliminated. In the past year alone, DOW is engaged in more than 100 projects worldwide, keeping plastic waste out of the environment, rolling up our sleeves and cleaning up waste in the environment, helping communities striving for a cleaner environment. Creating new systems to ensure plastic packaging is recyclable through collection, processing, and recycling. And ensuring that tomorrow's leaders have the tools to keep their world beautiful. Delivering circular economy solutions, innovating more sustainable plastics, helping customers reduce the amount of materials they use and to make their products recyclable, helping customers use more recycled materials in their products, finding ways recycled plastics can pave the way for a better world. And where they can help build the future. Seeking together, partnering to increase impact. Working side by side with people from around the world to understand the challenges and listening for their ideas for solutions. founding the largest and most comprehensive alliance of companies in the world focused on ending plastic waste in the environment, funding solutions in the world's most impacted areas, and working together toward a more sustainable future. Together with our partners around the world, we are building a more inclusive circular economy for the best quality of life today and in the future. We're just getting started. The world is far too important. Don't let it go to waste.
Okay, thank you very much. What you just saw in that video was a snapshot of what DOW tried to do in 2019. Now, don't let it go to waste is our catchphrase for how we're thinking about handling the issues around plastic waste in the environment. What the phrase says is exactly what we mean, right? We think that plastic, after its first life, should be viewed as a resource and should come back into the economy. So our whole strategy around dealing with this issue of plastic and plastic waste revolves around a circular economy and ensuring that plastic does not go to waste. So what you saw in the video also was the 3 parts of that strategy. Now, the first part has to do with ensuring that plastics do not end up in the environment. The second part has to do with delivering circular economy solutions. And the third part with doing all of it through partnerships. I think that we've heard a lot of conversations in the room this morning that show that we are all at different parts of the value chain, and no one single part or party can do it alone. And so we have to work together to make this happen, and that's why that third pillar is key for us. Okay. So another statistic that you heard this morning was around the issue of plastic waste in the ocean. So the statistic says that 10 out of the 10 rivers contribute to 90% of the waste that is ending up in the ocean, and 2 of those rivers are based in Africa, the Nile and the Niger. And this issue is really big for us because when we think about the source of that plastic waste, as was said also, they come from land-based sources. And so we need to think about what we can do on the ground to prevent that waste from reaching the rivers and then getting to the oceans. So we've heard a lot about Southeast Asia, especially in the presentation from Craig around the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. This data hits home very hard because if you look at the red part of the graphs where it talks about how much waste is ending up in open dumping, you can see that Southeast Asia, which is the crust of the issue now, has about 75% of that waste, but Sub-Saharan Africa is not far behind. We are at 69%. We do not want to be in the next Southeast Asia, so what are we doing to make sure that this doesn't happen? So first part of the pillar, we will work to keep plastic out of the environment. I think that this is a very bold statement to make, but what we do understand as DOW is that even as we are working on those innovations that will put plastic back into the loop to close the loop, keeping it out of the environment is equally important, and also addressing what has already ended up there. So one of the first big projects that we did as DOW when we started to think of what innovations plastic waste can go into, especially your hard-to-recycle stuff, was in the infrastructure space. So this is an initiative where we built 3 schools in Colombia with a startup called Conceptos Plásticos, and their innovation is 100% plastic brick that almost comes like a modular unit. And so you can stack them almost like Legos to build a building. And an example of that school is actually the image that you see in the back. And following this project with DOW, UNICEF boosted Conceptos Plásticos with about $1.5 million in investment, and they're doing this in Ivory Coast now. Another end use or innovation that we think about for plastics that are currently unrecyclable is our plastic road technology. So many of you might know that DOW went through a very transformational phase over the past 2 or 3 years where we merged with DuPont and then split into 3 different companies. And one of the portfolios that we inherited from DuPont was around their road technologies. So DuPont has what they call a compatibilizer for making asphalt roads that helps the materials bond well together. And we said, can we include plastic waste in part of the formulation and still have that performance? And the answer was yes. And so we started to pilot this globally. I've seen that one of the first plastic roads in sub-Saharan Africa has been built in South Africa, and we're also looking at piloting this sometime soon in the future here. Another big project that we put in place, and this was majority in the US, where we partnered with one of the biggest trash bag making companies called Hefty and said to them, can you make us an orange bag where we will go to people's homes and tell them, can you put these specific waste streams, and you can see what's in the bag, right? Your styrofoam cups, your multi-layer flexibles, or your laminates, the stuff that currently isn't recyclable or collected. We said, put these things in a bag, and a specific truck will come and pick them up on a day, and they will be sent to a facility where they will be utilized in creating energy. And so this program now has reached over 400,000 households, starting from a roll-up of a very small community. And to date, it's helping to recover some of that waste that would have ended up at landfill. Pulling our weight. So I heard someone say this morning that they didn't used to be a fan of cleanups. That was also me. Every time that I heard about cleanups, I thought someone was trying to look like they're doing something good. But I will confess now that every year I join maybe 20 cleanups or so all over the continent, because I handle all of Africa. So if I'm in Ghana, I'm in 2 or 3 cleanups. If I'm here, I'm in cleanups. If I'm in Nairobi, I'm in cleanups. And the whole point is that as we are working to solve the issues, there is still a lot of plastic that's out there. And as much as we think that you can't make a difference by going and picking up maybe just one trash bag, the difference is very visible after one cleanup. And additionally, the reason why I really like cleanups is because when people engage and come together to do an activity like this, it makes them take ownership for their waste. It makes them realize, I drink this. This is a product that I use, right? And now it's out here as well. So we have 2 signature cleanups as DOW. Pulling our weight is the hashtag for our signature cleanup as Global DOW, because we essentially said to each and every employee, this is how much waste a person typically generates a day. Go out and pick that much. So it also brings that sense of ownership. And these numbers are from 2019, where we had over 10,878 participants globally and collected about over 131,000 pounds of trash. Another cleanup, which is our signature cleanup for Africa, is called Project Butterfly. And the reason why this is slightly distinguished from the ones we do as pulling our weight is because here, when we go into the communities, we try and add an education and awareness piece to this cleanup to help people understand that, we're here for a moment to help galvanize this action, but when we leave, this is how you should think or view your waste. Delivering circular economy solutions, and I know that that's the big topic here today around pyrolysis. What are people doing with their waste? Are companies, are suppliers able to take that waste and bring it back into the loop? So DOW has been looking at doing quite a number of these things. And so when we think about a circular economy as a raw material supplier, the first thing that we did as DOW, we said, let's start in-house, right? Let's think about our housekeeping. What can we do to ensure that we are good stewards of the thing that we are making in our facility, which is the pellets? So on that production pillar, we managed to certify all DOW locations at the end of 2019 as OCS, Operation Clean Sweep, which someone mentioned earlier, which means that we will try to ensure that we do not lose a single pellet within our operation stream. And additionally, if we do lose pellets, we commit to reporting it in our sustainability reports for the year, which I think is very bold. And the follow-up to that goal is that we want to try and roll it along our value chain. So we hold ourselves accountable, and then we hold the rest of our distribution accountable as well. And this is just a quick slide on that. Design for recyclability. So I think that this is another big topic, and I heard Chandru touch on it a lot. And any recycler that you talk to will say this to you, right? people like to talk about recycling. People like to talk about recycling theoretically. They like to think this is fun, it's a nice thing to do, let's all do it and save the world. But the technical details in what happens along the whole chain to actually make recycling happen are very different. And one of the big parts, which also leads to the second part on the pillar, is designing. So as DOW, we make this raw material and sell it to a converter, who then works with a brand owner to create the packaging, which they then, who works with a converter to create the packaging, which the brand owner fills with their products, and then the consumer uses, right? So within that chain, the brand owner has how they want their packaging to look. A brand is a brand, right? It's customer facing. And so they're constantly thinking of what will make someone go to a shelf and pick up my product versus the next person's product. However, sustainability demands that you think in a different way. It demands that you think about what happens to that packaging after the product has been used. And so designing for recyclability is how the industry is responding to this, this issue. It's how we are working with brand owners to say, is your packaging recyclable right from the beginning? So that when it ends up in the hands of a recycler, hopefully, if the systems are in place, they can take it and easily recycle it. And this finished one is one of the examples I used because I use this product, right? So then for me, to know that this packaging is now recyclable makes me very happy, and DOW helped to enable this. In terms of alternative feedstocks, DOW has been thinking hard about how to incorporate different or more sustainable feedstocks into our production. And so one of the bold things we did last year, we partnered with a company called UPM. And UPM essentially is a paper-making company, or a company that uses wood to make paper products. And so one of the byproducts they had as part of this process was something called tall oil. So we looked in the innovation stream and said, can we turn tall oil into naphtha, which we can then feed into our crackers? And that answer was yes. And so what we did, we worked with UPM to turn this tall oil into naphtha, which we now feed into some of our crackers in Europe. So I didn't touch on the last one, which I think is the big elephant in the room around chemical recycling, but we did help to enable chemical recycling last year with a company called Funix, and are working to scale it up to start feeding naphtha from plastic waste into our raw material stream as well. So the last part of our three-pronged strategy has to do with increasing impact through partnerships. As I said in the beginning, we can't do it by ourselves, and so we are looking along the value chain for those courageous partnerships that can help to make this happen. So of course, the big one, which Craig spoke about this morning, is the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, where this huge amount of money has been put together to help galvanize the system. And essentially, the way that I see efforts like this, and this is from just being African and working around Africa to try and enable a circular economy. There are lots of people who have amazing ideas and want to do something in this space, want to help solve the issue. The question is always, where do we get the money? And so when a group of companies come together to form something like this with a strategic approach as to how they want to do it, it's very easy to align those projects that can feed up into this system. And Craig spoke enough about it, so I won't dive any deeper. But the second type of funding which is available, which DOW helped to galvanize as well, is this circulate capital model. So a lot of times when I consider how I'm going to fund a project or what I want to do when a partner approaches me, I constantly think of, if I work with our foundation to pay this money out as a grant, this is essentially money that goes out to someone who wants to execute on a project, and I can tell them, make sure you get me 500 metric tons of waste, make sure through this project you employ 100 people, make sure that you have an end use so the circular economy is ensured. But in the end, it's essentially like free money. And once I give them that funding, are they going to scale up? Are they going to replicate? Will they help others to also come on board and be able to do the same thing? And most of the time, that answer is no. So this capital model is big for me because it helps to ensure that continuity, so that financial, sustainable finance piece, where if there is this pot of money, where people can tap into it, get it, but they have the responsibility to pay it back, it changes the conversation a little, right? Versus getting grant money or some type of free money. And I want to see in the future something like this for Africa, because entrepreneurship is big here right now. It's directly correlated with unemployment. People have ideas and want to do things. Not everyone can get into the traditional work stream, work for big companies, and so starting your own thing, especially around waste, which is a huge topic right now, I think that a fund like this where DOW is playing a part, and this is specifically working in Southeast Asia, but we're trying to see how to get it down here. So the World Economic Forum Initiative is another, I'll call a coalition that basically is also trying to drive circular economy. Now they have not as WEF put money down to make this happen, but they are bringing together the partners who will make sure that it happens. So this was maybe announced about 2 years ago at Davos, and the intention was that this global plastic action partnership would have governments, would have several different people from around the entire value chain to try and make circular economy happen. So it's big in Vietnam. Ghana is the first country to sign up to it in Africa, and essentially it's helping to bring the key players to the table who can make circular economy a reality in certain countries. So then I created this last slide because I think it's important to understand that we are taking the same strategy in Africa. We are working with several different partners across all of sub-Saharan Africa to try and make things happen. And as I said before, we can't do it by ourselves as DOW. And so having the right partners to make all of these things happen, I think is very key. I'll just end in saying don't let it go to waste. I hope that next year or whenever we have another seminar like this, when I show you the video like the one I showed you in the beginning, it will be Africa-centric and we'll have more Africa-based projects, which is what I'm working on. And that's basically it for me. Thank you so much for your time.
Adwoa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just for a high-level kickstart to the Q&A, the chemicals process industry, while being a big contributor to the problem, also must lie at the apex of some of the solutions. If we're going to change the way we do things, if we're going to go to an eventual net zero carbon world. So how much effort and resources and focus is the DOW company putting into the role that the chemical process industry is playing here?
I think that that's a great question. And the way that I'll answer that, right, DOW as a company, and of course, this is, I think, everyone else in the industry, when we realized that this issue around plastic waste had become a hot topic, immediately came together and said, how can we respond to this? And I will say that DOW as a company is very sustainability driven. And so for over 2 decades now, we have set very ambitious sustainability goals that cut across everything we do, from manufacturing to how we engage in the communities that we operate in. So those were already in place. And some of the things that were being spoken about earlier about packaging, lightweighting, down gauging. Now I'm going to change my wording from lightweighting to right-weighting. Those types of things, were being done. Over the past 2 decades, but the conversation has shifted now to one that's quite emotional, right? And it appeals to all of us, not just as people in the industry, but as individuals. We also live in this same environment, right? I think that sometimes when people like to point fingers at industry, they think that we are this mystical creature. It's us. We work in these places, and we live in these places. And so DOW as a company, when we looked at it, we just took what we had been doing in the sustainability space and ramped it up. First of all, we put together a specific sustainability team for plastics. So I think that if you talk to any DOW employee, they'll tell you that plastics, they might equate plastics to sustainability. A lot of people think plastics equals sustainability at DOW, because now I think we have over 60 people globally that are working on this issue. So then I can sleep a little bit at night because it's not just on me for Africa. Secondly, we developed that three-pronged strategy and have been working on and intend to keep working on it in all the regions where we are present. And I think that the biggest thing about it also is not a top-down approach, right? It's not we're sitting in Europe and we're saying, do this here or do this there. Put people locally so that we can have African solutions to African problems, right? And so I'm one of those resources. I'm part of that strategy. And I think that that's how the chemical industry, at least speaking on behalf of DOW, is responding and should be responding to this.
Thanks for that. I'm just having a look through the questions, and we got so many that built up through the day. I've got to now start applying a filter to all of these. While recycling addresses the end of use of a plastic product, what happens at the end of life? Are we not perhaps just postponing the problem?
This is a good question. I think that there are several different terms which are confused when we are talking in this space, right? And when I talk about something like the infrastructure uses, like roads, like buildings, I specifically call them end uses and not necessarily recycling, because I understand that it's not necessarily going back into a loop. When people think pure circular economy, they consider a plastic bottle going back to a bottle, or even going all the way back to a feedstock that enters back into the loop. So I like to distinguish these things, and in the space of the stuff that we are doing that isn't truly circular, or that we can't say long-term that this will play in the loop, no one has the one solution to the issue, and there isn't a silver bullet to this problem, right? But what I do like is that everyone around in the industry is rising up to the call and trying to do something. So then in this space, we specifically call even that bucket of those types of end uses, we call them bridging solutions, because a bridge is something that gets you across from one point to another, right? So we're trying to bridge that space to get to that utopia where hopefully there are no new or virgin raw materials. And I don't know when this world will come into play, but while we're getting there, we are finding solutions to put that waste into. I hope that answers the question.
It does. There's another question that's just come in. It's around coordination, I guess, at a very high level. Maybe this is more for the Alliance than for DOW, but it'd be interesting to get your sense on this. There are all of these initiatives.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does seem like it's a little bit too fragmented and you get more return on effort if it was more coordinated. Your thoughts?
I agree in some sense. So something that I always say, and what I used to justify internally in DOW, when I say I'm going to join a new coalition, or I'm signing up to this new association, or I'm doing something, I want to be at every table where conversations are being had around this issue. I want to be there. I think that there are several different conversations that are going on. People are approaching the problem in different ways. And how we bring it all together, I think, is still a big question mark. But I want to be at each and every single one of those tables. And yes, the efforts sometimes are fragmented. What I showed you before, like the Global Plastics Action Partnership, comes into a country and says, what are all the things that people are doing in this space to make this happen? And then they bring all those people into the same room and have them talk, which I think is a great approach to trying to put all the initiatives together. But at this point, I think that we'll take it for what we have. And definitely in each of those different spaces and at each of those different tables, the conversations are very different, but they have the same end goal. And Craig, I don't know if you want to speak on behalf of something as big as the Alliance versus a few of the other smaller initiatives that are happening.
No, it was kind of the point I made a little bit earlier that a year ago we felt that the producers of plastic and the users of plastic were attacking these problems very, very different. And there was a gap that was beginning to emerge. And the gap was that, sorry, and that helps me. It's my coronavirus, sorry. And it was the gap that was driving a lot of inefficiencies. Everybody knows there's a problem. They all agree on the problem, but they just disagree on the solution because of the position they are in the value chain.
Yeah.
And so this coordination of the alliance, and so the alliance is producer companies, like Safripol and others. It has a rich converter capability. It also has the brand owners. We have yet to get the retailers, just saying that is seems to be a common, complicated problem globally. We also have waste management companies, Veolia, Suez. We also have cement companies, Geocycle, Lafarge. I mean, we have everybody. We have EPC companies. We have Worley Parson. We have Honeywell. And so the entire direct linear value chain plus the partners outside of that value chain plus all those NGOs. So getting everybody together to answer that question, why aren't these initiatives better coordinated across those 4 pillars that also Adwoa had projected there, across the 9 specific programs, is the answer. And I think Dr. Venter had provoked quite heavily. If we're not on top of this, okay, the problem will be escalated to another ranking, which is climate change. Forget about climate change right now. Just solve plastic in the environment, close the loop, move your practice from a consume to dispose type behavior to a consume and reuse or a consume and recycle character, because that's the low-hanging fruit. The alliance from a coordinated effort is there are commercially marginal projects that just aren't getting through. Yes, the technology's there, the capability's there, but the business case just doesn't make sense. And so whether EPR or individual funded or alliance funded, we have to make the business, these solutions business case ready. The fact that you start at a cost minus is where you're sitting at right now. We have to do what's right, because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
And that's a wrap, no pun intended. Adwoa Coleman, thank you very much. A warm round of applause, everyone.